Welcome to another enlightening episode of The Truth About the Plant, the show that takes you on a journey through the world of psychoactive plants and alternative wellness, all while delivering real actionable insights that you crave. I'm your host, Christina Dees. This is my equally talented co-host, Dr. Amanda Ryman. And Dr. Ryman, you get to tell them why we're here, why we show up every week. Well, we've been at this a while. Why do we do what we do?
Well, here we are in 2025. Hard to believe. We started doing this at the end of 2023. So we've been doing it a while now. And the reason we decided to do this podcast was because we know that it is so difficult to get good information about cannabis on the internet. And both as folks who have studied cannabis and understand the medical use of cannabis and the science behind it, we wanted to present content that was going to help you get science-backed, evidence-informed information about cannabis so that you can make great decisions about cannabis use and your own health and safety and that of those you love in 15 minutes or less. If you go on the internet and try to Google information about cannabis, you're going to get 100 different responses. Many of those responses will contradict each other. It can be so difficult to get to the truth. And let's face it, nobody, even those of us that work in cannabis, don't have the time to sit at the computer for hours and hours and hours and hours trying to sift through information to get to the bottom of it. So that is why we are here. We're going to give you what you need in 15 minutes or less so you can get the answer and get on with your day. You can think of us as your really cool aunties or your kick-ass granddaughters, basically the women in your life who will tell you the truth.
Well, it's a new year, new you, right? Or maybe just slightly
Newish.
less of you. Newish, just slightly less of you using cannabis. So this episode, we're going to dive into a resolution that's popping up on many green-friendly lists, which is, I want to use less cannabis. So whether it's a tolerance reset, a new wellness goal, or just because, we're here to explore how to approach this resolution with intention and balance. And let's ring in the new year with a little less puff and a little more purpose. So happy 2025, everyone. By now, you've probably been inundated with new year, new you messages on beauty, fitness, finance, and mental health. So how does cannabis fit into these plans? Whether you're looking to take better care of your skin, get out and hike on that mountain, live a more frugal lifestyle, or focus on stress reduction in 2025, cannabis can be a part of that journey. But what if one of your goals this year is to embrace more mindful practice when it comes to cannabis consumption? Well, we're here to help. And as always, we support moderation, minimum effective dosing, and consideration of set and setting. So, Amanda, if my New Year's resolution is to use cannabis more mindfully and in a healthier way, what does that look like?
Well, that's a great question. So, for me personally, January 2024 was when I made one of the biggest changes in my life and moved from smoking cannabis multiple times a day to using a low dose gummy every month or so. Personally, it was the right decision for me, but you don't have to make a severe shift in order to embrace a healthier lifestyle and relationship when it comes to cannabis.
Yeah, cannabis definitely isn't like all or nothing. So, what steps or even small ones can people take to bring the relationship with cannabis into balance in 2025? And if you're comfortable, share some things that may have worked for you.
Sure. Well, first it's important to examine your current use patterns and identify areas that you want to change. How often are you consuming? What is your method of consumption? What is your dose? How do you feel after you consume? What is your motivation? And this was the first step for me. Leading up to the change, I was already feeling like I wasn't getting the same thing out of consuming cannabis that I used to get. I started to be a regular consumer in my late teens, early 20s. I'm 48 now. So when I was about 46, I started noticing a change. I wasn't enjoying it as much. Sometimes I was getting anxious after consuming. Things about it that never bothered me before, like the smell of burnt cannabis or resin, things like that started to bother me. I kind of started to get turned off by the whole pattern of smoking. And I didn't feel like I was enjoying it as much, like I would consume it and maybe like for the first 10 or 15 minutes, I'd be like, oh, this is nice, but it would wear off fairly quickly. I found myself tired in the middle of the day. When you get older, you get tired in the middle of the day anyway. But I found that I was even more tired than I wanted to be. I had a real up and down in terms of my energy. And so I was really examining, like, why am I doing this? Like, what am I getting out of it? How much am I consuming? Am I happy with the method that I'm using to consume, which was smoking? And the answer was no. I was not happy with that method. After smoking it for so many years, I was starting to notice, some irritation in my throat. I was having to clear my throat a lot. I rely on my voice a lot, as you can tell, doing this podcast and other presentations. And my voice definitely wasn't as crisp and clear as it once had been. And another thing that happens when you start to get older is you start to pay more attention to your skin. And I felt like smoking was aging me faster than I wanted it to. So it was really before I even made the change, I started thinking about these things and noticing these things. So, many regular consumers find that when they really think about it, some of their sessions are just due to habit and they don't really even remember feeling the effects afterwards. So they might sit and say, oh, yeah, I just smoked a bowl. I don't even remember doing it. And I found myself doing that, right? Like I'd go to load another bowl and I'd realize I had just smoked one, but I didn't really remember doing it or really feeling the effects of it. And so really think about like, is this you? Like, what are you getting out of each and every time you consume? Now, I want to stress one thing, which is that the experience for recreational consumption is different than for medical consumption. So on the medical side, the goal may very well be to quell your symptoms without feeling high. So the person who's a medical consumer might say, yeah, I need to get to the point where I can consume multiple times a day and not get intoxicated because I need that product in order to stop my pain or stop my seizures or stop my anxiety. But I can't be high all day. So there could be a different motivation in terms of tolerance for people that are medical consumers. On the recreational side, the high is usually part of the desired.
Yeah, I think paying attention to behavior can really bring out patterns and habits and help you figure out what to focus on. So, after you captured your use patterns, motivations, and outcomes, what came next?
Well, I'm a big believer in harm reduction. I've talked about it a lot on this show.
Hmm.
So the principle of harm reduction, or one of the principles of harm reduction, is that you can reduce the risks of a behavior and reduce the potential harms of a behavior without stopping the behavior entirely. Right. So harm reduction, when we talk about drug use, it's not a new concept and it not only applies to substance use. So seatbelts, harm reduction. Driving a car has certain risks and potential harms. We don't tell you to not drive a car because you could get into an accident. We tell you to wear a seatbelt. So in case you do get into an accident, you are safer. Bike helmets, another form of harm reduction. Riding a bike also presents certain risks and potential harms. We don't tell you not to ride the bike. We just tell you to wear a helmet in case something happens. It's going to reduce the likelihood of harm happening to you. Condoms, another harm reduction tool. There's a lot of potential harms that can come with sex, including STDs, unwanted pregnancy. We're not telling you not to have sex. We're just saying if you do, use a condom because it's going to reduce those chance of harm. So with substance use, it's the same thing. So this is definitely true with cannabis. So when I was thinking about my method of ingestion, for example, and I was like, I'm smoking several times a day. Is there a way that I could be consuming this product that's healthier than smoking? And before I reduced my use a lot, I spent some time stepping down from smoking by using a dry herb vaporizer. So vaporizers are going to be healthier than smoking. You're still using cannabis through inhalation. So you're still going to get that same dose response relationship. You're still going to be able to taste the cannabis. There's a lot of similarities in the method, but dry herb vaporizer is safer. So if you're somebody that's smoking multiple times a day, you might want to try switching to a dry herb vaporizer, at least for some of those sessions. You may want to try using edibles, especially the nano emulsified edibles, where you're going to feel that effect right away, more similar to smoking. Tinctures, I have to mention tinctures. Tinctures are also going to give you that effect fairly quickly, but are very, very safe to use in terms of a method of ingestion. So another thing to think about if you're smoking is your environment. There is research that shows that cannabis smoke has a lot of very unhealthy components to it, even if you can no longer smell it. So if you live in a house with other people or pets, you may want to consider not smoking in the house or blowing the smoke outside because you don't want to expose other people in your life or the pets in your life to something that's potentially harmful. And then you may want to think about the number of times a day you're consuming and see if you can reduce that. So again, we're not talking about giving it up forever. That scares a lot of people and that makes them not want to change because they can't bear the fact of forever. Forever is a really long time. But if you think, all right now I'm smoking 6 times a day, I'm going to see if I can smoke 4 times a day or 3 times a day. That is actually going to reduce the harm. It's going to lower your tolerance so that you're feeling it more each time, but you're not giving it up. You may want to switch to a lower dose product for a week or two. If you're able to get a nice 1-to-1 flower at your dispensary instead of a 25% THC flower, you may want to try going to a lower dose of THC and you're still going to be able to get that effect. If you're not able to find that, one of the things I suggest to folks is make a blend yourself. So you can order hemp flower online, make sure you're getting something that's tested and reputable. That's going to have very low, just trace amounts of THC in it. It's going to be very high in CBD. And then you can mix that with high THC flower and make your own 1-to-1 low THC blend. Or if you're into it, take a brief break to reset your tolerance. This can be a weekend. Tolerance resets fairly quickly. So these are all ways to bring your relationship with cannabis back into balance using harm reduction, where you don't necessarily have to give it up forever.
Yeah, and I like to tell people to relate it to how you want to feel. So relate it to an emotion. How do I feel after I smoke or take that edible? Or, am I feeling tired? Am I feeling Am I feeling like I just want a break? Right. So if you're somebody who's not that, and we're not talking to you right now, carry on. But if you are starting to be more mindful and you start to notice that feeling, that's conscious awareness. And with that awareness is where we're talking about you can make some of these changes. So I know we've
Absolutely.
spoken about it on this show before, but what if a regular consumer decides to take a break? What can they expect?
So it really depends on how much THC you consume and what your tolerance is like. So for heavier consumers of THC, there may be some withdrawal symptoms, right? And we do have an episode on THC and withdrawal and overdose that you can watch in our library. But with THC withdrawals are things like depressed mood, loss of appetite, and trouble sleeping. And this is because the endocannabinoid system regulates those functions. When you are introducing cannabinoids from the plant, THC from the plant, for a long period of time at high doses, your endocannabinoid system basically takes a vacation. It really isn't needed to function the way it's traditionally functioned because you're doing its job for it through the plant. So when you stop bringing in phytocannabinoids from the plant, it might take your endocannabinoid system a week or two to snap back into working mode and to start regulating these functions properly. So for a week or two, you may feel a little bit out of sorts. And that's why when your endocannabinoid system, like starting a cold car, is like, it's like revving back up. Another thing you may experience is very vivid dreams. So THC suppresses REM function, and that's the sleep period where we dream. For people who have PTSD or nightmares, this is a great side effect of THC because they don't want to dream. For many of us, myself included, I really missed dreaming. And it's interesting because when I think about one of the biggest motivators for me to reduce my cannabis consumption, it was the dreams. Having my dreams back and having them be so vivid and so interesting and entertaining, it was kind of a reason why I was like, the effect I was getting from THC didn't make up for the fact that I didn't have these dreams for so long. So you can expect to have some very vivid dreams.
Yeah, I wasn't a heavy user by any means. I was an occasional user, and I took a year-long break because I really just wanted to connect with myself. And I felt like I was using to relax, but I also was trying to train my body to feel my emotions. So I like how you were saying for the heavier consumers, like letting them know that there may be some withdrawals. I tend to say you don't have to go cold turkey if you don't want to, if you feel like that's going to be too much for you. And like you say, Amanda, just decrease until you get to that low enough dose that you can take it away and just deal with it for the 24 hours. Kind of like
And I
caffeine, if you've
also
ever taken a
recommend
caffeine break.
I also recommend as a practice, and this was something I did before I even drastically changed my consumption, was to take a couple days off every month. So
Hmm.
I would take I would take 3 days off every month from cannabis because it does really help you reset your tolerance. It helps you keep any mindless habits in check. And it, like you said, it helps you reconnect to yourself and your own emotions. And I think that that's really important. So I would say, regardless of if you decide to change your consumption patterns overall or not, think about instituting a couple months or a couple days off every month.
And, change is hard, change is uncomfortable. How can people maintain the changes that they make?
Well, this is a great question. And as you mentioned, making a change is hard, but maintaining a change is even harder. Right. So the change itself, there's like some excitement around it. Hey, I'm doing something different and it's a challenge and we like challenges and we get rewarded by following through. And then that kind of wears off. And then it's like, all right, now it's a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later. Maintaining that change and not slipping back into old patterns can be really, really difficult. So I recommend documenting the benefits of the change you have made. So, what's happening that you like? Are you feeling higher now when you use because you're using less often? Are you enjoying it more? Are you coughing less? Are you spending less money? I mean, oh my gosh, even though I grew my own for some of it, I used to spend a lot of money on cannabis and I definitely am saving a lot of money now that I am not using cannabis. What benefits have you experienced from the change you have made? So, acknowledging these benefits and being mindful of them can act as encouragement to keep the change going. So, whenever you're like wanting to slip back or starting to slip back or feeling bored with your change, you can refer to the benefits and you can say, I feel so much higher and more euphoric now when I do consume. I don't feel like it's a habit. I'm bringing attention to every time I consume. And oh, look, I'm not coughing as much. And I feel like my clothes smell better. And I've saved this money. And now I can go on this trip or now I can buy this thing that I really wanted. So just reminding yourself of those things can help keep you motivated. But don't be too hard on yourself if the change doesn't last. You can always start again, right? This is a one shot deal. And if I don't make this change forever, then that's it. Most people take multiple times before they make a change stick, right? So progress is rarely a straight line and you learn something every time you go back and start again. So it's not a failure. It's a learning opportunity and thinking about why did I not stick with the change? What might motivate me to stick with it next time? And then implementing that is really important. Cannabis use is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So developing a healthy, mindful relationship with cannabis, taking your time to do that will help ensure that it will continue to play a beneficial role in your life for your entire life. So this isn't something where you have to figure it all out in a month. This is a constant thing you're going to be working on. It's never really over. So give yourself some grace. Give yourself some room to go back and forth with your behavior and just keep your eye on what you want that relationship to be like.
I love that. And I think this is a great place to wrap up this fresh start conversation. And we want our listeners, our viewers to remember resolutions aren't about restriction, they're about recalibration. So, like Amanda said, don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work this time. We love journaling. So, highly recommend getting a pen to paper and just journaling about your experience. So, whether you're just cutting back or you're just rethinking your relationship with cannabis, every step is progress. If you got questions and you want to share maybe your resolution this year with us, or maybe your journey of how it's going, you can always drop us a line at info@mypersonalplants.com. And don't forget to explore our beautiful YouTube garden channel for even more plant powered inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell while you're there to stay connected so you don't want to miss any episodes we got coming up this year. Here's to a balanced, mindful, and elevated new year. Cheers, Amanda, to 2025.
Cheers.
We'll see you next time.